Is there a curse to being the number one team in the regular season? I totally understand for postseason play, i.e., look at basketball. How many of those number one seeds have gone on to win the national title? But in the regular season, it seems that those teams would rather be the number two seed overall. And if I can be a washed up athlete for a second to give us a tangible reason why it might be harder to be number one and why I might understand the curse, is because back when I ran track and cross country, peep the medals, it always felt easier to be in second place and to trail the leader because I knew how much ground I needed to make up. I knew when to make my move, and I could tell when that runner was getting tired by how their form and stride were starting to break down. But when you're in the lead, you don't know any of that. So you have to be the best at the right time, otherwise, a team like Queens is ready to dethrone you. I'm Paige Dower, and this is the Field Pass. And thankfully, Queens was not able to finish the job. But we all know one team that would be more than pleased to be in that position to take care of Tennessee, and that's Vanderbilt. But as the Vols prepare for the Commodores, it's what happened in their game against Queens that might be an indicator of themes we might see against the Commodores or as the regular season comes to a close. And that's that Dylan Dreiling continues to be a clutch player for Tennessee, and Tennessee's arms, they're starting to look a little thin. Now, Dylan Dreiling, he's already come up clutch a number of times for this team. You look at his go-ahead grand slam against Georgia on March 30th, and then a couple of weeks later in Game 2 against LSU, he had the go-ahead two-run single against the Tigers. Then you fast forward to Tuesday when they were taking on Queens, where the game was tied at 3 in the bottom of the 7th, and he had a 3-run home run out to right field to break the game wide open and give the team a 6-3 lead. Now, that clutch play has been all but commonplace this season, and maybe his impact is best highlighted in his team leading 54 RBIs this season. Now, that hit all but closed the door on Queens and prevented Tennessee from losing its first game as a number one team in the country.
My heart rate's about as high as Frank's, and you can imagine what that is. To have a calming influence on the mound is big in those jam situations we're talking about, but it's equally as important in the box. And again, I think when some of these guys 1 through 9 are just pressing to do what they got to do to help us win the game, it's a fun lineup. But it's not a good enough lineup to have 2 or 3 spots just disappear on you. And, I'd have to watch tape and analyze it, but I've kind of picked up anytime that does happen, and we've been able to win some games in an ugly fashion when it does, but it's usually 2 or 3 guys start out the day maybe trying to do too much or something other than just win the game, and it boils into a big ball of frustration, and you end up with a spot where you don't get anything out of it. And again, we used examples here. Reese probably doesn't want me bringing up a strikeout, but that one just sticks out of an at-bat where he drained the pitcher. Cal Stark hits a homer behind him. That's a team effort in a weird way, probably a way the fans don't notice, but and Chris Burke, I think, is the one who was telling me this past weekend, hey, when he used to play in the big leagues, the whole deal was just take a bite out of the pitcher, take a little piece of him with you, even if he does retire you.
Where you guys are at with the DH.
But after Tennessee's game against Queens, I'm starting to put a couple more question marks on my notepad behind Tennessee pitching, because typically they don't pop up on the radar of concerns despite giving up 3, 4, 5 runs, because Tennessee's offense is humming to the tune of 10, 12, 20 runs. I gave them the benefit of the doubt against Lipscomb despite giving up 9 runs and losing their first midweek game of this season, but when you load the bases twice against Queens, those alarms start to ring because, as most of us know, those midweek pitchers, your bullpen in those moments, are often your relief pitchers in these weekend games that turn into your postseason play type games. And if you're not able to arise to the occasion now, you're starting to run out of time to get those issues fixed that weren't always there. And out of the bullpen, Aaron Combs continues to be a reliable pitcher for Tennessee, and he delivered once again against Queens when they had the bases loaded.
And the other thing, as far as the confidence you can take from it, if he doesn't throw tonight, there's no sense in staying out here. Tomorrow he probably gets some work off the mound, so it'd be a little lighter and not quite as intense. But it's not going to simulate what he's going to be thrown into more than likely this coming weekend. So for him to get out there and do it, I think was good. I don't think we'd script the end of it the way we did. I mean, we left Kirby out there a little longer than maybe you game plan, but this time of year is survive and advance, and the more you can get in the heat of the fire and get repetitions at learning how to survive, the better you are as a team and as an individual as well.
Now, where I think all of us should make an adjustment is heading back to the homepage after this episode to listen to the launch of our new segment called The Rewind with Jimmy Hines, where he dives into Tennessee and local sports history. His latest one is with the SEC Commissioner and Roy Kramer, where they talk all things NIL, transfer portal, and where he got his coaching career started. Here's a clip from part 2.
What do you think of the current state of expansion in college football?
Well, it's tough for me to talk because we were sort of the originator in some sense of that. The purpose you had in a conference was to bring sort of a regional group of schools together for competition. Unfortunately, many of those, as you know well, were made primarily because of the distribution of television money and the ability to produce enough to raise their stream of revenue. Somehow, I think those schools have lost something. I think in long term, the schools on the West Coast have lost considerably.
So I want all of us to go back to the homepage, listen to part 2, and if you missed part 1, this is a good sign that you should subscribe so you don't miss out on all the good content that we're putting together, and hey, it'll give you insight your friends don't have. Now, how about the Lady Vols? That was a tough transition, but we'll roll with it because their title run continues after defeating LSU in the quarterfinals, and Coach Karen Weekly said prior to the trip that regarding its chances to make history again, it's always good to be on that side of making history.
When you're making good history, no, that never gets old. So we'll take that. And, we're going to get down there and play to win, no question. I think this team ultimately wants to be in a position to win the big one at the end. And, we're not going to look ahead to anything, but we understand that everything we do every single day, we're putting money in the bank to help us get in that position. So I think that's our mindset this week is these are steps to get where we want to go. If we, have a game we lose down here, that doesn't mean that we can't ultimately achieve a bigger goal at the end of the season.
I also asked McKenna Gibson what separates this team not only from last year, but from the rest of the pack. This is what she had to say.
We have relied a lot of our success based on the past year that we had. So I think just being able to play for each other and our identity and our why of why we play softball. I think just being able to dive into that more helps us just kind of relax and not put so much pressure on ourselves. So us as a team being able to rely on each other and just lean on each other and, play freely, play for each other. That's the biggest thing is like we just love playing for each other, playing for that girl next to you. So not thinking too much about what we did in the past or what we can do, but just thinking more of like how we can play together as a team.
Now the Lady Vols are just 2 wins away from going back to back, and of course it's always easier said than done, isn't it? But if they do so, they'll become just the 3rd team in SEC history to win consecutive tournament titles. I'll also be out of town Sunday, so I won't have our typical Sunday show, but I'll be back in town for our usual Wednesday 3 p.m. show for everything that happened while I was gone and what is to come. But thank you again for watching and listening, and as always, please subscribe.